In this next step, I'm going to talk to you all about how to make the handles. We're going to attach them to the sides before we sew it together. So I'm going to set this aside and we're going to talk about what we're going to do. When you cut out your handles, you cut out 4 that don't have interfacing, and then you fused 4 with interfacing. So you will have 8 pieces total. Each piece without interfacing goes with a piece with interfacing. And we're just going to put them together, right sides together, and pin them together. I know, I love the pinning. When I pin these, you know, it's a small piece. You can pin it however you like, but I pin all 4 corners because I find that if it's going to shift, it always shifts in the corners, and I want those corners to stay as square as they can. It may seem excessive pinning for such a little piece. All right, now I'm going to take this to my sewing machine, and I am going to start on a side, not right in the middle, but towards the end of one side. I'm going to do a 1/4 inch seam. I'm going to move my, because we don't need too much bulk, we're going to turn this right side out and we want to reduce our bulk, so I'm just going to do 1/4 inch, and I'm going to leave about an inch opening at the end. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to pivot at my corners. And as I come around here, I'm going to leave myself a nice little gap for turning. And I'm going to backstitch at the beginning and the end, because when we're turning it through, we don't want to pull those stitches out. All right, so I'm going to complete this step with all 4 sets of my handles. Then once you get it here, we're going to clip these corners. And again, we're going to want to clip close to, but not through the seams. So I'm just going to clip straight across like this. On all 4. The next thing we're going to do is just turn this right side out. Now, this is where you're going to need some type of tool to help you get those corners out, especially since we are working with this heavyweight interfacing. It's a little bit trickier. So I don't recommend sticking something really sharp in there. You're probably going to poke your corners out, but I choose one of 2 things. I have a pair of scissors that has a nice rounded edge that sometimes I'll use, or some type of turning tool that you can just really get in here to get your corners out with. And I like to get mine as square as I can. Just really work those out without poking through your fabric. I've done that before. I am going to bring it to my ironing board though and make it look nice and flat. Check for any threads, make sure that those all get clipped off. And now I'm going to take it back to my machine and I'm just going to top stitch around about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. We want to keep this pretty close, pretty tight in there. I'm not going to back stitch at the beginning or at the end. I'm going to overlap my stitches by just a couple of stitches. That's going to help it stay looking a little bit nicer. All right. All right, so that's done. I have just a little bit of a stitch there. I'm going to go back and get that with a seam ripper in just a few minutes. But in the meantime, I'm going to show you what we're going to do to attach these handles on. So I'm going to, you can see here that we have one already attached on, this is our one that we're working from to put our handles on. What we're gonna do is fold these handles in half. And we're gonna measure 3 inches in from this outside edge to place this. On the smaller medium basket, the smaller size basket, you're gonna wanna line this up right with this, where the trim and the body piece meet. On the larger basket, you're going to want to place it 1 inch above that mark. So let me grab my ruler here. I'm going to measure in 3 inches. I'm going to place my handle there, and then I'm going to pin it in place. One little thing I want you to note though, I'm just going to slightly overlap this top piece over my bottom piece so that I don't have so much bulk here on the bottom edge. It gives me just a little bit of a cleaner line when it all gets sewn. And I'm going to pin the top piece in place like that. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Okay, the next step, we're going to take this to our sewing machine and we're going to make a rectangle, and then we're going to make a cross through it. So basically we're drawing a little rectangle shape in here that will really anchor our stitches down, or our handles down in place. So basically what we're going to do is divide this handle in half, and that's where we're going to sew our rectangle. If you feel like you're super picky and you want to make sure that's half, you can measure this and mark it. I'm not too worried about it, so I'm going to eyeball it. It's not really a big space, so it's not too hard. I like to backstitch at the beginning and end of this as well, because I don't necessarily end up overlapping at the end. I'm going to start at where my top stitching was, and I'm going to end where my top stitching was, so that I'm overlapping over my top stitching with my rectangle that I'm sewing right now. So you can see right now I'm stitching right over the top of where my handle was. All right, little trick here. We've got all this fabric to put through our machine, and your throat might not be as big as this one is. So a little trick, you're just going to want to roll it in, and that's going to help you maneuver it through the machine a little bit easier. All right, I'm coming back around to completely close off my rectangle. Now I'm going to redirect and go diagonally across my rectangle to make the first cross pass for my marking through it. So I go all the way through that rectangle, and then I'm going to overlap the side stitching one more time. To the top corner, and then I'm going to cross through my last pass, making like an X. And I'm going to backstitch here. And that's it for that side. So I'm going to do the same thing on this other side so that I have both of my handles sewn down on this panel. And then we are going to go to the next step, which is sewing these together.